Hello, and welcome to the second part of our 5-part Excel course. This one is on making sense of data. This course does assume that you've been through our Excel 1 course and are familiar with the basic operations of Excel. If not, go and have a look at that first. This course includes using tables, using structured references for calculations, conditional formatting to highlight data, and data validation to make data entry correct. You may find the workbook linked to in the notes below this video. If you're a York St John student, you can get the accompanying Excel workbook to try things out. Go to Moodle, go into the Student menu, go down to Digital Training, select Digital Training Courses on the bottom left, select Excel Training Course Notes, and this is course number 2. Double click it and click Download. Then you can open it from your downloads. Let's enable editing and get going. We're on tab A here, and this is all about tables. Tables are a feature that make Excel understand where your data is located. They also help you protect your data from being mixed up by sorting some of the data and not sorting the rest of it. Firstly, making a table. I'm clicking anywhere within the data. Got to be within the data. On the Home menu, I'm going to go Format as Table. Pick a colour. The colour makes no practical difference. Excel has found the data with the marching ants around the outside. It says my table has headers, which it does, nice simple headers at the top of each column. If I say OK, Excel has now made that into a data table. We've made a table, and you can tell it's a table when you click in it as the Table Design menu appears at the top of the screen. We can change the automatic table name. You're not allowed to use spaces or numbers at the start, but we could give this a name. And press return. One of the real key benefits of making a data into a table is that Excel will not let you mix up parts of rows. You can't, for instance, sort just the first names without also including the whole row. Excel will always move whole rows when doing a sort. One of the many reasons you might want to make things into a table is because it gives you the ability to sort and sift easily. If I want to sort all of my data by first name, I can click on the first name column. At the top of the menu here, I can sort it A to Z, sort it in reverse. If I want to sort by a different column, such as date, I can come over here and sort by date. Have a go at that. You can also sift data. If I want to only see the information where the person is associated with the colour orange, turn off all the ticks at the bottom here in the colour column, tick orange and say OK. I can do that to more than one column, so I could come over into the department column and I could turn off all the ticks apart from the library, for instance. Say OK to that. And now we're down to 3 records. You'll see on the left, all the other records have been hidden. They're not deleted, they're just hidden. To get them back, you can either turn the ticks on within the individual columns, or a quick method, make sure you're clicked in the table, go back on the Home menu, go in the Sort and Filter selection, and there's a Master Clear there, which will return all your data to being visible. Have a go with that sifting. Lastly, in terms of basic data operations, sometimes we want to do a multi-level sort. This is also on the home menu, and again I've clicked in the table first. In the sort and filter section you can go custom sort. Say for instance we wanted to sort by department, and then within each department, if I add a level, I want to sort by the colour they've chosen. So that's going to sort by department and then by colour, and then within each colour I might want it to be sorted by first name. So I can add all those values, say OK, and now we've got the catering department. Within that we've got sorted by colour, blue, green, orange, and within each colour we've got the alphabetical list by first name. In the table design menu that's at the top, we're going to look at a couple of things. First thing is slicers. A slicer is just like the ticks to sift a column. If I click a colour slicer on, I'll get an additional control that you can use without having to go into the menus. So I can click on pink and click on orange, and instantly the table swaps over. If I wanted to have multiple selections, I can turn it on with this tick here. And if I want to clear the selection back to seeing all the data, I can click on the cross. If I click back into my table and back on the table design menu, the last thing to see there is convert to range. This means turn off all the table features and stop acting like a table. Convert it back to being ordinary cells. If you do it, however, the colouring remains, so it can be a bit confusing and you might think this is still a table. The test for it, if you click into what you think is a table, if the table design menu doesn't appear, it's not a table. I'm going to use the undo key to go back one step, to go back to being a table again. And there you can see the table design menu appearing. I'm going to scroll down now. A little reminder, if you go on the view menu and freeze panes, you can freeze that top row so you can still see all those headers. If I scroll down to the bottom of the table, you can see over on the right here, that's the extent of the table at the moment. If I start typing another row, as soon as I've entered one cell, it includes that data into the table automatically. So when you work directly below a table, it's always going to add that to your data set, and then it'll be included in sorts and sifts. The same applies if you start creating another column directly to the right of the table. As soon as I've typed a column heading and pressed enter, that column is part of the table as well now. Another reason for using tables is that when you write calculations using tables, you get a much more readable formula. Let's make a calculation. Calculation is always going to start with equals. If I want to multiply the number of sales, I'll click on the same line. You have to be on the same line as where you've put the equals. Click in the sales column and you can see it's written in equals sales. It's taken the name of the column. I'm going to multiply that. Shift and 8 to get a star. And I'm going to click in the price column. Again, on the same row, has to be the same row as the equals sign. And you'll see it's written in sales times price, and that's very readable. If I press enter now to enter that cell, that calculation, Excel will also copy it down all of the rows. Tables are all about doing the same thing on each row, And each row actually says the same thing. They all say sales times price. So there's an implied for this row built into that calculation. So every calculation is going to take the sales column for that row, the price column for that row, multiply them together and give you the result. If you want to do something across a whole column, such as total it, that also appears slightly differently when you're using tables. I want to add up the total column to get a sum for all my sales. In other Excel circumstances, you might be tempted to use the row directly below the total column to add things up. But because of the feature where that is included in the table, it's generally not a good idea when using tables. So I'm going to leave a gap. The sum total could go anywhere. On the home page, I'm going to go to the sum menu. I'm going to click the sigma symbol. Now, Excel will default to adding up all the cells above, and that's actually less helpful than you might think it is. You might end up putting extra things in these boxes here. They may be related, they may not be. It's actually better for us just to highlight the total column exactly without the header. So I'm going to click on the bottom here. I'm going to swoop up with my mouse held down and stop short of the header at the top. In the sum formula, it's actually put the table name and then a bracket and then the column heading. This means that the sum will be taken of that whole column regardless of how big that column gets. If you insert extra rows into the table, it'll still include the whole column. So it's a real benefit to make sure that you're adding up the whole column all the time, even if you've added extra rows in, and you're never going to miss out on any of the cells, which you might have done if you'd have had a fixed calculation such as K2 to K100. Let's have a look at conditional formatting. Conditional formatting is all about highlighting cells, generally by changing the colour of the background. It's non-destructive, it won't change any of your data, but it can give you real insights into what's going on. I'm going to work through a few examples here. In order to apply conditional formatting, you need to tell it what cells you want to apply it to. I'm going to go for these cells in column B. I'm going to swoop down and highlight just the data I'm interested in. Conditional formatting is on the home menu. I'm going to look at this first set of rules first. I'm just going to pick out a few examples from here. The very first rule you can apply is greater than. So if I select that rule, having selected the cells, I can then pick an amount that I want to activate. So if I only want to highlight cells that are bigger than 60, I can type 60 in the first box. You can see a preview happening over on the left hand side here as I do it. You can choose the colour you want to highlight with. There are some standard colours, or you can go down to customized to pick your own colour. You can change lots of things, including the number format, the font and the colour of the writing, whether a cell has a border or not, but most times you want to change the fill, and the fill is the background to the cell. So if I pick bright yellow for that, say OK, OK to the rule, you can see on the left here, any cells that are greater than 60 are being highlighted. Now these cells are being monitored dynamically. If I click into one of these cells and type a number, 67, and press enter, you'll see it lights up immediately. Similar rule, if I highlight this second set here, in conditional formatting, another example would be equal to. This is a text column here, so I want to highlight when I've got a yes in the column. So if I select equal to, type the word yes, and I want that to go green when it finds a yes in the column. Say OK to that. And there it is. And again, this is dynamic. So as soon as you change a cell, it'll either highlight or if you change a cell the other way, it'll turn the highlight off. Again with text, another one of those rules is contains. So text that contains, got to be a bit careful with things like this. If I type AN, thinking about banana, that's also going to catch orange as well. So you might need to be specific with the choices you make. Let's look for the word orange and we'll make it go red text. There we go. Another example, I've got student IDs in this column, and the last option in this top set of rules is duplicate values. If I turn that on, it's looking for duplicates. Again, you can set the colour you want, it says OK, and there it is. It's showing you anything that's already found elsewhere in the column. The first three columns of rules we applied, each cell's individual, whereas this is starting to look across the whole column and look for duplicate cells. It won't tell you where the duplicate is. If you've got more than one pair of duplicates, they'll all have the same colour. But it does highlight you to an issue. For instance, with student IDs, you may only want one line per student, and therefore having a duplicate would be a problem. You're going to have to fix it, but the conditional formatting will tell you it's there. The last example from the first group of rules, these are dates. There's a whole set of rules to do with dates. A date occurring in the last 7 days. And again, you can select the colour you want. We can go for light red fill and say OK. And then those dates are in the last 7 days from today. So in this second batch of rules, I can apply the top 10 items. If I only wanted the top 4 items, I can set that control to that. If I want to change the particular highlight that I'm going to get with this, let's go for a yellow fill on these. Say OK. Now this is monitoring the whole group. So if one other cell becomes a high item, if I put 99 into that cell, that one lit up and the 79 turned off because that's now not in the top 4. The next group of rules you can apply are data bars. These are like little mini graphs within the cell. So you can pick a colour you like and you get a proportional graph within the cell. The tallest one will always fill out the whole cell, the rest are proportional to that. Another example here is colour scales. This is the 4th group down. You can have a single colour scale, so that's going to go from white for the lowest colour up to bright green for the highest colour. You can go for 2 colour scales, or you can go for 3 colour scales. In this case, if I go for the 3 colour scales, the highest number is bright green, the lowest number is dark red, and yellow is for the midway point, and then you can see shades of these colours as the numbers change. And then the last example we're going to put on here is the 5th set, which are icon sets. So we'll put some traditional traffic lights on there. There we go. We've got top third, middle third, bottom third on our traffic lights. Now it's worth noting that you can have more than one conditional formatting applying to a cell. So I could go back to one I did earlier and apply some traffic lights on there. And it would not only have, in this case, the top 4 items highlighted, it'd also have top third, middle third, bottom third traffic lights. So you can apply more than one rule, for instance over here, where I'm looking for numbers greater than 67. I could also apply another rule that highlights numbers greater than 80 with a different colour, red in this case. Now you'll appreciate that each cell can only have one colour, so in this case the rule to make the cell red when it's over 80 has overridden the rule to make the cell yellow when it's over 60. Now you can change the order of your rules. Let's have a look at that. If you highlight the cells concerned, go into the conditional formatting menu and go into manage rules, you'll see the 2 rules that apply to these cells. The top one is overriding the bottom one. I could change the order round, and when I say OK to this, you'll see the yellow's overriding the pink now. So manage rules lets you decide which order you want things in. A couple of other things to note from the manage rules box. You're only seeing rules for the current cells that you selected. If you want to see other cell rules from the worksheet, you've got other options there like this worksheet, in which case you'll see all the rules that apply all over this worksheet. So it can get quite confusing. You can duplicate rules and delete rules from here. Let me just close that. You can also, if you want to, clear rules from the menu. So if I want to clear just the rules from the cells I'm over, I can clear those. I could clear the entire sheet all at once. The last thing you can do from that manage rules box, if I highlight my traffic lights here and go into the conditional formatting manage rules box, you can edit a rule. Generally, when you edit a rule, you get far more controls than you might have originally had. When we applied this rule originally, we could either apply it or not apply it. Now, however, we can go in there and we can make changes. So if I didn't want to see any yellow dots, I could say no cell icon on the yellow dots. If I say OK to that, you can see there are no yellow dots showing on those middle numbers. If I wanted to, I can make lots of other changes. Another example of a change you might make to a rule like this is, rather being based on %, you might base it on an absolute number. So if I only wanted to see a green dot when the number's over 90, and I only wanted to see a red dot when the number is less than 15, I can set those up, say OK, OK the main box, and I'm seeing a lot fewer dots. I'm only seeing that one because it's 90 or above, and I'm seeing the 2 red dots because they're less than 15. So you can basically set up all these rules to make cells display exactly how you want. Last thing I want to remind you about is something from our first course, is the Format Painter. If I take the Format Painter, double click, it's picked up the formatting of this cell here. Now, although that's got a green dot in, it's actually the rule that it's applying. If I swoop down over some other cells, they will have the same rule applied to them. So it gets rid of any rules that were there and adds the replacement rule on instead. And I'll turn off that paintbrush, and now you can see those ones have got the same rule applied. So you can build up your rules and apply them to the same sheet, different sheets, as you see fit. Let's look at data validation. Data validation is all about making sure the data you put into your Excel spreadsheets meet certain criteria. Let's have a look at an example. It isn't always easy to work out which cells have data validation without trying them out. So I've coloured this cell yellow. I'm going to go on the data menu, and then data validation is in the data tools section. It has this little symbol of a mixture of a tick and a no entry sign, and you go on data validation again. Now cells are normally set to accept any value, but you can change that. So here's a few examples. First one, if you wanted to limit the numbers that could be typed into a cell, if you go for a whole number, maybe you only want to allow between 1 and 100. If you say OK to that, this cell now, if I type a number into it, 55, and press enter, that's absolutely fine. If I click back onto it and type 123, when I enter, it's a stop box that tells me the value doesn't match the data validation restrictions, and I can either retry or cancel. Cancel will get rid of the number, and retry will put me back in the cell ready to retype it. If I put a valid number in, I'm absolutely fine again. You can customize those error messages. If you go into the data menu and data validation again, the error alert that comes up can be customized. I could say not in range, and in the error message only from 1 to 100 is allowed. So if I have an error, that's what will be displayed. You can also, in the same box, put an input message. So I can go on there and I can give a little tip before people enter a number. So the input message is going to show before people even enter a number. So I could put a simple message, 1 to 100 only. If I say OK to that, you'll see as soon as I click into that cell, I get my input message. Maybe that's going to help to remind me what's valid in this particular field. And if I make an error, 145, I have a custom message to maybe give me a bit more information, more relevant to my particular use. Data validation isn't part of the formatting, so it's not copied with the paintbrush. If you want to copy that to some other cells, the easiest way is to press the delete button on your keyboard, so the one with the word delete on. If you want to use the mouse, you can use the clear section and clear contents from the home menu. Once you've done that, you can then copy and paste that cell, and even though it's blank, it's got the data validation rule attached to it. So all of these will either accept or deny according to the rule you've set. So if I come over here, and again I'm going to colour the cell in just so I know where I'm going. Another data validation rules that can be applied include decimals, date ranges, times if you're entering times, length of text, and then under custom you can put complicated formulae. We're not going to go into that today, but you can error check things with a formula that gives true or false. The one I'm going to show here though is lists. If you're asking people to select where they work, which building they're in, their job title, that sort of thing, it's good to offer them a choice. It's good to have consistency of the inputs for later when you want to count things up and similar events. So for a list, you can put the items in the source there, with commas in between. Say OK to that, and then a little menu will be attached to the cell and you can select that. People can still type if they want to, as long as it's one of the valid entries. Data validation will only allow the items that are on the list, whether you've typed them or selected them. If you change the data validation of a list, if I get rid of plum off my list, It's not going to delete the data that's already in cells. This is only applied at the point when you enter new data into a cell. But I'll no longer be able to reselect plum. If I change it away to something else, plum is not an available option even if I type it. Going back to our first set of data validations over on the left here, if I go into data validation, if I wanted to change my data validation rule, maybe to allow up to 200 for some reason, if I tick this box at the bottom, Excel will look for any cells that have exactly the same data validation rule about them. I guess I ought to change my tip and my error message at the same time. All of these cells now work up to 200. Now it is possible to use data validation lists that are held elsewhere. I don't particularly recommend this. Every time you want to add something to the list, you're going to have to change the data validation for all the cells you want to use it on. But a better way to do that is this sort of example here. If you use tables as part of your data validation setup, you can make a very flexible list that can be altered easily and can be located anywhere else. It could even be on another worksheet. So here I've got a list of fruits. Now it's not currently a table, but as we did right at the start of this session, I'm going to go on the home menu, I'm going to go format as table and give it a colour. And there's my little mini table there, list of fruits. I'm going to change the name of it from table 2 to fruits, because that's going to be easier for me to remember later on. Now in the data validation, there's a little trick to asking the data validation to look at that. So we go into data validation, exactly the same as before, and we say we want to find a list. So we're going to apply a list, and instead of the source being some particular cells, we're going to use a little trick in Excel called indirect. Now indirect means go and look up for something, and it has brackets, so you need to put a round bracket, Shift and 9, and you need to put the name of the thing you want it to look for in quotes, double quotes, Shift and 2. Now I called my list fruits. So whatever you've called the table, this is the whole table, not just the column, the whole table. I put the fruits in quotes. I'm putting brackets before and after the word fruits, and indirect is the command. Now you have the list feature, looking at the fruit list for you to choose. The reason to put it in a table rather than just a bunch of cells is if I type below it, that will be automatically included in the table. And so if I go back to that cell, apple is included there automatically. I could change the order here, I could add extra things in the middle, I could delete things out of this list, and this list could be hosted somewhere else. So if you're going to use complicated lists, this is the best way to do it, with a table and the indirect command. We have courses that build on this, looking at some formulae, having a look at pivot tables for summarising data, and then a final course looking at more formulae. If you're interested in really proving your Excel skills, you can also undertake MOS exams, Microsoft Office Specialist exams. There are separate exams in Excel and Word and PowerPoint, as well as our courses supporting the contents for those exams. You can also do self-study and exam practice on some software we can supply. Email Digital Training if you're interested in learning more about Microsoft Office Specialist exams. More help is available from Digital Training. Send us an email, book a tutorial session, or see the help pages on our website.